Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. My name is Robin Lewis, and I am excited to be here with my co-host, Mr. Neal Oates Jr. Neal, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. So I get to say it is always a pleasure to do this with you because it really is.
Right on, sir. Likewise. And so, to our listeners, if you listened to last week's episode and you found yourself nodding along and thinking, well, that's me. That's how I'm showing up right now. I'm consistent. I'm disciplined, but something still isn't clicking. Then this episode is for you.
It really is, Robin, because what we said last week rattled a few cages, but in a good way. A lot of people realized, wait, effort isn't my issue. And with that being said, Robin, I think it was freeing for a lot of people.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined. They're built, brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Yes, exactly. And we want to say this clearly right up front to you that consistency is powerful, but consistency without alignment leads to frustration. And so the goal of today's conversation is simple. By the end of this episode, you'll have clarity on one thing to focus on. You'll have a practical 30-day reset plan, and you'll have a way to turn your consistency into actual momentum and results as you begin the year.
I love the fact that this is in alignment with everything we believe on the Big Life Podcast, that it's not about doing more, that we're going to have this practical plan to actually reach results.
Exactly. It's about doing the right things on purpose. And we figured that this would be a good sort of follow-up as we begin the year to help all of us to kind of be on this path for 2026.
So, Robin, let's do a quick recap because you mentioned last week's episode. So we talked about why consistency isn't the problem. Last week, we talked about something that hits close to home for a lot of high capacity people and leaders. And that's the reality that many of you aren't stuck because you're lazy. You're stuck because something in your system is misaligned.
Yeah. And Neal, you walked us through 5 gaps that quietly sabotage progress. Even when effort is high, you pointed out these 5 things that can get in the way for our consideration.
And so I just want to quickly go back and review those 5 gaps. So we had positioning, and this is where you were unclear on who you help and how you create value. The next one was environment, that environment gap. People, expectations, and inputs that shape your behavior. The third gap was the leverage gap, spending time on things that don't move the needle, and that was that silent killer there, Robin. The fourth gap was our messaging gap, activity without resonance, where we were doing the thing, but it did not resonate to the right people or at the right depth. And then that final gap, when consistency is not an issue, was the feedback loop gap. Working hard, but flying blind, not looking in that mirror.
Yes, and if you haven't listened to that episode yet, you might want to pause this one and go back because it really sets the foundation. Today isn't about diagnosing everything, and so you might want to pause and go back and listen if you haven't, and then come back to this one.
Absolutely. So yes, Robin just told you to stop listening to us to go listen to us. Because here's what today is about. You mentioned that it's not about diagnosing everything. It's really just about choosing one gap.
Yes, and then fixing it with intentionality over the next 30 days. So that's what we're talking about here. And I think you can pick up from the first episode, last week's episode, and then use this now to springboard forward. And so we're encouraging you to pick one gap. And so here's where most high capacity people mess up in January. They try to fix everything at once, right, Neal?
Robin, so when you say everything, here's what we're talking about. January has hit us. We're trying to get new habits, new goals, new systems, new energy, new.
And by mid February, we're exhausted and discouraged. And so here's a rule we want you to remember: you don't need a new personality, you need a new priority. And that's what today is about.
Robin, so that is a relief for me because from the onset of us planning this episode, it was something that I was able to say, I can commit to this. And so for the next 30 days, your job and my job is not to overhaul our entire lives. So me saying that should be a relief to many of you as it was to myself.
Exactly. So what is your job? Your job is to answer this one question that we have for you. Which gap, if improved by just 20% in the next 30 days, would create the biggest difference? So we want you to narrow it in to that one gap. Which gap that, if improved by just a narrow amount of 20, if it's just improved by a little amount over the next 30 days, that would create the biggest difference?
So, Robin, I'm glad that you clarify that because what you're not asking for is perfection. You're not asking for elite execution, and you're definitely not asking for total mastery. And so that's a relief to me, even as your co-host, as I hear you talk about these next 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just talking about a 20% improvement here, or that can come from being focused on it. And that's the gap that we want you to choose, right? And so you want to choose a gap, first of all. And then we're going to walk through this now. We're going to share with you a 30-day alignment reset that you can use. And we're going to walk through this together week by week in this episode. So first, in week 1, we want you to diagnose and decide.
So I'm glad you said diagnose and decide, because many of us, when we hear diagnosis at the first of the year, maybe we just renewed our health insurance and we're sitting here, we're like, oh my gosh, the last thing I need is a diagnosis. But this week is about clarity, not action. And so that's, once again, relief, because we've already made it through the holiday season. We're here. So now we just need clarity, not action. And here's what clarity looks like. It means that we ask ourselves, which of the 5 gaps is costing me the most right now? What would better look like in 30 days? And so let me just pause right here, Robin, and just remind our audience that we're not asking them to look at the first quarter. We're not asking them to look at all of 2026. What would better look like in 30 days? How will I know if this has worked, right? And so once we start answering those questions that we have asked and that we're going to answer honestly, then we can gain clarity on this journey.
Yeah. So be specific is what we're suggesting here. Like, if you don't want to say something like, I want better communication. If you're talking about positioning, for example, you want to say something more like, by day 30, 3 people can clearly repeat what I do and who I help. You see it? So you're being more specific with it.
And last week, Robin, you mentioned clarity multiplies, but here's what clarity also does. It creates traction that we can move forward with. And so that was week number 1. That's going to be our goal. That's going to be our focus, diagnose and decide. Robin, I'm going to ask you to talk about week number 2, and that's going to be build one upgrade, if you would, please, sir.
Yeah. So the idea here is now we want you to make one meaningful upgrade. And it depends upon your gap, obviously, the gap that you're going to focus on, but make one meaningful upgrade in that area.
And here's where Robin and I want to be clear. While we are sharing this easily, and I'm going to say quickly, this is going to require you to keep track of the decisions that you made the week before, to keep track of the work that you've done. And so when Robin mentioned that depending on your gap, that's where you're going to target that meaningful upgrade. Let's say if your gap is positioning, you're going to write this sentence and then test it with 3 people. I help blank achieve blank so that blank. And this is where I help who achieve what so that, and that's the ultimate outcome. And Robin, let me just pause here. Ladies and gentlemen, please heed Robin's, I'm going to say advice. If you did not listen to last week's episode, go in and check that out because it is going to be the foundation of everything that we continue to talk about here in this episode.
Yes. And so that's a great example. And I love that what you shared about I help who achieve what, right? That's a great way of coming up with that positioning statement. But another example is, let's say it's environment that you're going to be, that's the gap that you're going to be working on. And, you want to label the people and the inputs in your life as fuel, neutral, or friction, right? So the FNF that Neal shared with us on last week's episode. So, and then you want to reduce friction and increase fuel. So if you're working on the environment gap, then label the people and the inputs that are in your life as such. Is this fuel for me? Is this just neutral, or is there friction? And then you want to try and reduce the friction and increase the fuel.
Robin, are you willing to just speak to our listeners for those who might be resistant and they might feel like it's not a good thing to put a label on a relationship because they're saying, well, I don't want to label a person. It's a loved one that I feel might be causing me friction, or I don't know if it's neutral or if it's fuel or friction. Would you be willing to just share how do we turn this week, and if environment is our issue, how do we get the confidence? How do we come through and say, all right, so you're telling me, Robin Lewis, Neal Oates Jr., that I have to say that my cousin is friction, even though I love her or love him? And so how do we work through that process of lovingly labeling? And are you asking me to put this on next to their name in the phone? So I put Johnny Friction. Do I have to let them know, say, hey, you're friction in my life, so I'm cutting you loose or reducing that? How do we do that in a way that's beneficial to us and not detrimental to maybe our psyche or our mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question and it's practical. I don't have all the answers. And yeah, it can be loved ones that are family, it could be blood relations in our family that fall into that category without a doubt, right? And so I think the key here is you're not going to be labeling them, first of all. You're not telling them their friction, but you're going to approach the conversations that you have, maybe the time that you spend together, even you're going to approach a little differently. Maybe you're not spending as much time. You're understanding maybe triggers that can lead to that sort of the conversations that become friction, and you can not get into them. Or there might be times where you might need to be frank and say, hey, listen, you know what? I am going in this direction right now. And so I just want you to be aware of that. It's not anything to do with you, but it's just that I am going in this direction right now. Or there's some times where I've had to do this with loved ones, is to say, hey, listen, we don't see eye to eye on some things. I love you, but I just want you to know I am going in this direction. And so sometimes you do need to have frank conversations like that even. But so, I don't have all the answers there, but I would say you have to, each one can be treated a little bit differently, if you will, depending upon the relationship that you have with them. But the point for you is that if it's holding you back, you want to move in a direction that's going to reduce that friction and allow you to move forward. What about you, Neal? I mean, I'm sure we deal with all these things a little bit differently. What would you share in that regard?
So for me, it is one, the awareness. And so even before we actually label, many of us have never taken the time, myself included. I just assume that because I'm an optimistic, energetic, forward-facing person, that those around me are the same. And so For me, the hard work was being aware of the fuel, the neutral, and the friction. And then after I had that awareness and realization, then I had to be intentional about the environment and the energy that I was giving each of those. And so for me, mine was not an external label. It was an awareness and internal in my head and my heart where I knew how to operate. I knew how to move. I knew the time investment. Like, one, you are my fuel, Robin. All heart, ladies and gentlemen. So this is where you and I, we spend an disproportionate amount of time together, whether it's via email, text, phone call, or here on the podcast. There are others in my life that are friction. So I just had to minimize those and my expectation of the fuel, neutral, and friction, that they're different. And so I believe that once I have the right expectation, then that is really what made the difference for me. And I've had frank, clear conversations, and many times I've given my friction or neutral people the choice or the opportunity to move into the fuel if they desired.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife always says, don't take my choice away from me. So I like people to know and to communicate and be clear. We talk about the positioning, who I am, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then give them that opportunity. Do you want to move up, or do you want to move out or move down? So I found that works really well. However, Robin, that's my personality. My personality is okay with having those conversations. So we're just encouraging you to find out what fits and what meets and works for you. But also, don't be afraid to push yourself and challenge yourself, because ultimately we have to make sure that you are doing the right things that's going to help you grow as an individual. So I hope that helps.
Yes, sir. Very helpful. I just want to add one last thing. Sometimes it's a group that you're a part of that it might just mean leaving that group too, right? That's the way. So that group in and of itself creates friction in your life. And sometimes you just need to leave the group. And so, yeah, very practical. Good stuff, sir. Thanks for sharing.
Sometimes you just have to leave the group, remove yourself from the environment. So let's look and see, what if it's leverage? What if the gap is the leverage gap? Then we want to eliminate, delegate, or delay one low value activity that's stealing your energy. Stop doing or delay doing that thing that you should not be doing at all.
Exactly. So you're upgrading whatever gap you choose. We're giving you examples here. Another example might be if it's your messaging. So you can rewrite one message as an upgrade. You can rewrite an email or a post or a pitch that you make, and where you're focusing more on the outcomes and not the effort that it takes. You get the point here. Is that we're sharing each one. The point is to upgrade in this week.
And the last upgrade that would be for the feedback. If your gap is that feedback loop, install a weekly check-in with 4 questions. What worked? What didn't? What am I avoiding? Ouch. And what's one adjustment for next week? And this is, once again, we're not asking you to do a total overhaul, just one small tweak on a weekly basis.
One upgrade. That's it. All right. So Neal, I think we've painted that picture very well, very practical for our listeners today. So what would week 3 look like?
So week 3, this is the one where we've done some decision making. Okay. And now it's about the executing. Can we execute and track? This is where we run the reps. This is where we're in the game, where we finally get to do that thing. Now, not perfectly, not emotionally. That's not the way we're going to do these reps or get this practice in.
Yeah, we're talking about now consistently. We want you to track one number that matters. So in this week 3, we want you to track one number that matters. It could be conversations that you started. It could be follow-ups that you completed. Here we're getting really practical now. It could be proposals that you sent out. It could be workouts that you completed. Or maybe it might be writing sessions that you did. But in other words, whatever that is for you, we want you to track that one number now so that you can know what you're doing consistently.
This is the one that I love and hate, Robin, because the old saying goes that you can't improve what you don't measure. And so I know last week you talked about don't be vague. And then even today you mentioned, hey, I don't want to be better in communication. You want to have a very specific goal. So we want to be able to track that. And here's why. Momentum loves measurement. We might not love measurement because it shows us what we did or didn't do, but momentum, that thing that we love, loves measurement. And so with that, with the whole idea of execute and track, week 4. So we're on the last week of our 30-day transformation, 30-day upgrade. And this is one I believe is fitting for you to lead us with, Robin, and that's the review and lock it in. So let's go with the review and lock it in, sir.
Yeah, so at the end of 30 days, you want to ask some questions again, right? What actually moved, right? So what did I see actually change? What have I accomplished here? What actually moved? What stalled? What didn't move? Right? Really good questions to ask ourselves. What signal did I ignore? Maybe there was a signal that you got that you ignored it. And what one adjustment would make next month 20% better? So you're reviewing and then locking in, right? So you're doing this in 30-day increments. And so at the end of these 30 days, as you ask these questions, you want to lead to the point where you're going to make some changes into the next 30.
Now, Robin, let's be clear. You're asking us, you're advising us to ask these questions, but this is not with judgment, correct?
Correct. Exactly, man. This is leadership, right? The first person for me to lead and the hardest person for me to lead, but the best person for me to lead is to lead myself well first. And that's what this is about. I can tell you, Neal, something that's personal. There were seasons in my life where my calendar was full, and I've shared some of these with you, sir. But the point is this: my efforts were high, but my results were flat. It's the reality. I was busy. My calendar was booked. I was doing. Like I shared last week, where my dad would ask me, "Well, you busy? Busy again today? Busy, busy." But the question is, am I busy doing the right things? And there were times in my life where I stopped and I looked back and I recognized that I was busy not doing the right things. And so the results that I was accomplishing in my life were flat.
Robin, and I know we end our episode the same way most times, and it says we're right there with you. But the unfortunate reality is that a lot of our listeners are right there now. So when you talk about what your reality was, many of our listeners are saying, Robin, we're there now. So we're hoping that you can give us something. We're hoping that you can encourage us so that we can get past that. Listeners, we're glad that you're here. And if that's where you are, just know that this 30-day plan, this 30-day executable plan that we have shared with you is going to be the path to getting to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I wasn't lazy. I wasn't uncommitted. I was misaligned, really, if you get right down to it. And what I eventually realized, Neal, is this: that sometimes the frustration that you feel isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you've outgrown the current design. And so that's what we want you to hear. So, so it's just a design issue then, right? That you've outgrown it. And so it requires some changes.
And I want to say here, Robin, and to our audience, that that's such an important reframe when we start to realize that it's not failure, that it's maybe a growth or a design issue, because then that's freeing. So thank you for reframing the same thing that we see here or that we're experiencing into a positive spin.
Yeah. So then the question becomes, what is this season asking me to redesign? So it isn't about why isn't this working. The better question is what is this season asking me to redesign?
Robin, while that's the right question, that's a harder question, sir.
Yeah.
That is a question that's going to force me to do more introspective work. And you mentioned going in and reflecting and then making adjustments. What is this season asking me to redesign? It's just so much easier if I just continue to say, I'm doing my best. I'm giving my effort. I don't know why this is working. And we start looking externally. But now when you do that internal work, that's going to be something that is necessary, but it might be scary and it might be challenging. So I'm glad that you were the one that said that and not me. So here's your invitation as we start this year. Now, this is what I like to say. Ladies and gentlemen, don't try to fix everything. I'm going to say it one more time for the people way in the back. Your invitation as you start this year, don't try to fix everything.
Exactly. So pick one gap and you're going to start to work on it this week, right? So pick one gap and then start working on it this week.
And so here's what we're going to encourage you to do. If you want to engage with Robin and I, you can email us, you can chat with us, leave a comment. And so let us know what your gap is. So you can just make it as simple as possible. You can leave the first letter of your gap. Maybe it's going to be P for position, E for environment, L for
Leveraging,
for
messaging,
messaging, or for
feedback.
feedback. So, ladies and gentlemen, no, that was not planned. I just forgot what the L for leveraging, messaging, and feedback were. And of course, Robin came through and helped me out as a good partner in progress always does. So, positioning, environment, leveraging, messaging, or feedback, let us know because we want to do this thing called life and growth with you.
Yeah, or reach out to us if you want help diagnosing what's holding you back. And we certainly would love to come alongside you and help you with that as well. And remember, consistency isn't the enemy. Misalignment is. And so thanks for walking into this new year with us. We hope you've found this meaningful and helpful and believe that if you can put this into practice and follow this 30-day incremental plan, that it will help your 2026 get off to a really good start and that you will pick up a momentum that will carry on into the year.
And so with that being said, Robin, I just want to tell people to keep leading.
Yes, and keep growing and keep believing.
Robin, this has been a treat. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you go back and listen to last week's episode so that we know that when consistency is not the issue, that is probably misalignment. And then share this podcast, share this episode with someone who might be doing all of the right things, but maybe that consistency is not the issue, it's just alignment. And if you believe that 30-day actionable plan is something that you're excited about that can make a difference in your 30 days, in your year, we would love to hear from you. So make sure you reach out to Robin and I, comment, share, subscribe to the podcast. We would love to hear from you and for you to be a part of the Big Life community. Anything to say to our listeners before we go, Robin Lewis?
Yes, sir. Well, I don't know when they might be listening to this because obviously this is going to be out there now. But if you're listening to this when it came out in the beginning of 2026, here's to a great 2026 for you. May this be your best year yet.
Wow. And I love the encouragement. And we cannot wait to continue this big life journey with you throughout the rest of the year. And maybe this is the first episode that you've heard, regardless of when you discovered the Big Life podcast. Go back. We have enough episodes for you to binge great content to help you be the better leader, the person that you were created to be so that you can experience and share the big life. So we're going to leave you as we always do. And that is that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Right on. Peace.